So the Defense Ministry has come under fire for systematically covering up such incident.
We'll come back to that in just a moment. From Asia News Weekly, you're listening to Asia Now, a collection of stories and interviews for the Asia-Pacific region. In April, a 23-year-old male was found dead, the result of brutal abuse from his peers. It's the latest in a long series of scandals facing South Korea's military, and a story taking center stage in Asia now. Welcome to Asia Now. I'm Steve Miller. A 23-year-old Republic of Korean soldier is dead, beaten lifeless by his attackers. Despite media concerns over threats from North Korea, these killers were close to home. In fact, those responsible were in this poor boy's same military unit. Today on Asia Now, I speak with Korea Times reporters Ji-hye and Tong-hyung to discuss this latest event and an ongoing horrific revelation, and why it took so long to come to light, but more importantly, what it says about Korean society and what's next. Ji-hye and Tong-hyung, welcome to Asia Now.
Yes, thank you for having us. Yeah.
So let's set the backdrop for this discussion. Earlier this year, one of the conscripts in the military went out and killed 5 of his colleagues. And then there were some suicides. But what we have seen recently really exceeds that. What happened?
There has been a recent activist group revealed the details of a hazing death in the military, and that has been grabbing headlines. The death actually happened in April. The brutal nature of the death, he was practically tortured before he collapsed and died, and that has been raising new questions about whether the military culture here has become dysfunctional, and the defense ministry and government is trying to, react and make some promises that the life of soldiers would be improved.
Ji-hye, you were on hand this past Friday when the Defense Ministry made an announcement.
The military prosecutors asked the court to postpone the final trial of the 5 attackers to buy time to review the case record because the public and activists are arguing that the 5 soldiers should be charged with murder. The prosecutors initially charged the 4 with manslaughter and 1 with assault. So today, the ministry's prosecutor's office suggested that it is reasonable for the judicial officers in charge of the case at the Army to change the charges from manslaughter to murder. But they said it doesn't have legal binding force, so final decision will be made at the Army's prosecution office.
Do prosecutors have an idea when they might bring the case to trial?
It's not known yet. They just postponed it on Tuesday. It's not known that when the final one will take place again.
Do you think that this is a reflection on a bullying culture of society? We've seen bullying in the military for months now. We had the shooting spree, we had the suicides earlier. In all those incidents, those that were involved reported a lot of bullying by their peers in the Army.
Well, personally, it does feel that way to me. It does seem to feel like a reflection of the Korean society. I mean, the details of the death was very shocking. I mean, the private was brutally beaten. He was put on an IV drip so he can recover just to be beaten again. His genitals was coated with anti-inflammatory medicine. He was forced to swallow an entire tube of toothpaste. And this kept happening until he just collapsed and died. And it is undeniably shocking, but there was also a tragic sense of plausibility to it. It is an extreme case, but I don't know how you can say that these extreme deaths, case of death was disconnected from the everyday culture that happens in the military. I think it's not just about the military, it's at schools, it's just at every level of society. There is intense pressure to obey what that organization has defined as a social norm, and often these pressures trump human rights. And I think the hazing death was shocking, but it was also tragically, it felt kind of probable.
I think the military should come clean on such issues because soldier who died from the torture died on April 7th, but the details were known only on July 31st after the human rights activist group disclosed it at the news conference. So the Defense Ministry has come under fire for systematically covering up such incident. I think they didn't want the public to know about such issues because there is shameful things about the military. So I think they should conclude on such issues to prevent the recurrence of the incident.
Tong-hyung, you bring up a really good point. We've seen it happen in schools. Just recently, there was a high school teacher who, required one of her students to do 800 squats because he didn't do homework, and he ultimately was sent to the hospital. We've seen it in big business. Where do you think this behavior got started, that it became acceptable?
I personally think it all begins in schools. I mean, from a very young age, the teachers are allowed to be oppressive and violent to very young students, and this seems to drill the thought into students that being respected as a human is something they have to acquire. Human rights becomes an idea that is conditional and relative rather than being non-negotiable. Personally, one of my third grade elementary school teacher always, used to say humans are humans only if they are able to listen to instructions, and those who aren't are no different than dogs or pigs. And I don't know, this kind of thinking just extends further as, people get out in the society. It extends to companies, and probably it most dramatically manifested while the men served their military service for 2 years. I think it's not a coincidence that the reason hazing this happened at a high school and a military unit.
Ji-hye, what is the military doing to curb repeated offenses?
The ministry works to improve the bad habits in the ministry at the moment. They launched a committee to draw measures for this mission, but it remains to be seen how effective the measures they will produce, because the measures they produce so far have proven to be a fruitless effort.
Which brings about another question. What do you think really needs to be done so that this doesn't happen again?
Well, there has been a lot of talks about, how to change the military culture. They're talking about making an independent body that could control issues over soldier treatment and human rights issues. There are talks about allowing soldiers to use mobile phones to make a more open environment, but at the same time, it's hard to replace deep-rooted mindsets. It's hard to replace how the militaries have done things for decades, and I think while there are growing chorus of voices advocating change, I think some of the responses by politicians or the military, I believe, are very telling in explaining why these, tragic accidents keep happening. I mean, Shim Dae-pyong, a conservative politician from President Park Geun-hye's Saenuri Party, he kind of commented that military or these suicides and other horrific incidents keep happening because the military culture has become more democratic and less oppressive and hierarchical than it used to be. And personally think that's definitely getting things backwards. There is a resistance of change, which is ironically mixed with the in the voices advocating changes. So let's see. Allowing soldiers to use mobile phones is a very innovative idea, but there's a lot of resistance to it. So I think we'll have to look and see. I mean, we had this debate in 2005 after another soldier who, after being bullied, just killed his comrades with a grenade. And in the past 9 years, I don't think there has been too much improvement on how soldiers are spending their lives in military units. I think there is further watching whether anything significant would be done to improve the soldiers' lives.
Thank you very much, Ji-hye. Tong-hyung.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
That was Ji-hye and Kim Tong-hyung from the Korea Times. But let's not let the conversation end there. I want to hear from you. Why do you think this is happening more and more in Korea? Or has this always taken place, but it wasn't until we have this prolific press and the incredible penetration of social media that we tend to see it more? Also, what needs to be done to stop these events from occurring? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section on Facebook or Twitter. Now, if you haven't found us on Facebook or Twitter, let me give you those addresses. On Facebook, you can find us at facebook.com/Asia News Weekly. And of course, we are at Asia News Weekly on Twitter. If you have any questions or feedback about the show, you can reach us directly through email. Just drop a line to asianewsweekly@gmail.com. If you really enjoyed this show, I hope you'll take a moment and share it with your friends, but also subscribe so you won't miss the next one. When you subscribe to a podcast, it's delivered directly to your computer or your mobile device. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn Radio. And if you don't use any of those services, just visit asiannewsweekly.net and click on the subscribe tab. You'll find the RSS feed there so you can add it to your favorite podcatcher. Now, if you do use iTunes or Stitcher, I hope you'll do me a huge favor and take just a few moments to rate and review the show. It's how podcasts get featured, and it would mean so much to me. Well, my friends, that is it for today. I want to thank you for your time and for listening to this episode. For Asia Now, I'm Steve Miller. Asia Now is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.